How Conservatism Infiltrated Pop Culture. This is a conversation on Matt Bernstein's podcast. And he has on tech and pop culture journalists Kat Tenbarge and Taylor Lorenz, both of whom I have had on this stream before.
Everyone wanted to look like Kylie. Kylie wanted to look like a black woman. And now Kylie doesn't even want to look like Kylie. I feel like I look like...
Wait, sorry. Al Hawkeye, thank you for the 24 months. Awesome Ryan, thank you for the tier 1. Alice, thank you for the 7 months. This is the main reason why I follow and sub to you, Caroline. Thank you for being a leftist. Pop culture commentator. It's been hard to find anyone who isn't reactionary. Well, I'm here for you. Mr. Psychopomp, thank you for the 15 months.
Like a fraternity brother on his way to like the fraternity brunch where but everyone's closeted and they're all like having sex behind the scenes. They're all cheating on their girlfriends with each other. The little sweater wrapped around my neck. An image of a MAGA youth has emerged in the months
If you don't follow Matt on Twitter, he's really funny.
leading up to and following the 2024 election. And it isn't young dorks wearing sweat and grease-stained polos, looking like they just left their mom's basement for the first time in 3 weeks to pick up some tiki torches from Party City and chant, "Jews will not replace us." No, they look like a cheap copy of Reagan-era 80s Republicans. Instead of polo, they're wearing Shein. They're frat bros pairing suits with MAGA hats. They're clean girls with little black dresses and good blowouts and long skincare routines. They're old money with a vape. It's a drastic change from what felt cool 10 years ago. This aesthetic phenomenon came to a head last week when New York Magazine released its new issue with a photo on the cover from a pre-inauguration party for influencers who helped Donald Trump get elected. The photo features many men and a few women, all white, looking straight out of an 80s country club, until you squint and notice the high noons and the TikTok napkins. In today's episode, I want to explore this theatrical shift in conservative aesthetics. What feels new and what feels, to me, a little bit Hitler Youth adjacent, with a specific focus on what's drawing young women.
Also, keep in mind that a big part of the marketing of conservatism to young people is to make it seem cool, right? Where for a minute there, the liberals were cool, right? You had Barack Obama playing basketball, being besties with George Clooney. The whole liberal ecosystem was the cool place to be a part of, right? The late night hosts who were all liberal, et cetera, et cetera. And a big change that those on the right have worked to implement is making conservatism, supporting MAGA and Trump and embracing this alt-right culture is to make it seem cool and to make liberals seem like losers, right? The whole, snowflakes, losers, babies, blue hair, feminazis, that is, it's so much of politics is marketing, and that's what this is. It's marketing a lifestyle and a belief system to people, especially young people, in a way that presents it as this cool thing to be a part of. Hollywood in general used to be considered cool, and Hollywood generally leans liberal, but nowadays Hollywood has found the youth don't give a shit about like Mindy Kaling hanging out with Kamala Harris. They do care about Logan Paul, who they think is cool, hanging out with Donald Trump.
Into what they'd call not republicanism, but the MAGA movement. And today to do that are two of my best friends. If you listen to this podcast, you are very familiar with them, and I am so happy we could all be in the same Zoom at the same time. Taylor Lorenz and Kat Tenbarge, welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're so excited to be here.
The group chat has made it onto the pod.
I have announced in previous podcasts that Taylor, who used to work at the New York Times and the Washington Post and a number of traditional publications, is now on her own as a freelance journalist. And Kat, who was previously at NBC News, is also finally on her own. Congratulations.
I did not know that.
Thank you so much. It has been a crazy day, but what better way to top it off than with this podcast?
We can say whatever.
It is wild. It's wild how so many journalists who I know have now gone independent. Like anyone who was actually trying to do something different in journalism got to a point where they were like, yep, I just need to go independent.
What do we want now?
I need the Substack.
Yes.
Both Kat's and Taylor's newsletters will be linked in the description of this episode. They are both doing some of the best reporting on and about the internet, so please go subscribe. And if you would like to support this show, we are over on Patreon, where Kat and I recently finished a 4-part, 6-hour-long excavation, investigation of Bi Sister, the homophobic vitamin gummy debacle that transformed YouTube and social media as we know it. That's on Patreon. That will also be in the description.
We could have gone for 6 more hours.
And in the future, we might. So
That's true.
As is tradition on this podcast, I usually start any episode with a really specific event, thing that happens online, thing that happens in person, and then we kind of extract from that broader conclusions about shifts that are happening in the world. And where I want to start today is this New York Magazine cover, which really made waves on the internet.
New York Mag is really good at like a very powerful, striking graphic, because they also had like the famous Nepo babies
Oh
cover.
my God.
So
One of my favorite pieces. What was that? 2022. So good.
I'm like, they're really good at creating like a little zeitgeisty magazine cover.
The Cruel Kids table. I was so over. Oh, it's just crazy how splashy this was. I was at Sundance Film Festival in Utah this past weekend, and at one point, like, my friends and I were sitting around a hot tub, being like, "So did you see the Cruel Kids table?" It's like nobody in the year 2025 talks about magazine covers this way, and it was such a big deal. Do one of you want to visually just describe this cover for people who are only listening to the audio version of this?
Well, the first thing I have to say about this cover, like, there's always a point on a picture where your eye is like drawn to this part of the image. Like, that's good photography, is like having a part of the image that you are immediately drawn toward. And for me, it's the woman in the bottom left who is wearing this very, like, no offense if it's not Shein, but like, I looked at this and I was like, I think that dress is from like Shein or a different retailer like it, or it's like inspired by those trends. And, you know, she's very beautiful. The fact that it's
No
this
offense
really
if this is
elaborate,
not
extravagant party, and the clothes
She's saying it's cheap.
are so inspired by like Shein trends, just really stood out to me immediately.
Yeah, I mean, the picture itself is like it's taken from above, because this was a 2-story party. There was a downstairs and then this balcony. So it looks like the picture was taken from above. It's this aerial shot almost of this like super crowded party where you just see a bunch
The
of
reason that she catches my eye is because because of the insane amount of blush,
white
and also the sunburn / tan
faces kind of crowded together. There were Black people there. They were not in this picture.
She looks burnt.
And like Kat said, your eye gravitates towards this group of 5 young people in the corner, kind of all looking together. Like, all the people in the photo are looking together off screen at something, probably on the big projector screen that they had up there.
And then the other ones who catch my eye are these 2 in the hat, because it just looks dumb. Like, I'm sorry, one thing that I hate, and I don't care what the fucking hat is, I hate somebody wearing a baseball hat with formal wear. I think you look stupid.
And so you have a couple guys, one in a tuxedo, one in a suit, one in this really corny American flag hat. And then two girls sort of crowded behind the main girl, the star of the show, this 21-year-old SMU sorority president, who, like Kat mentioned, is like, first of all,
It's
super
giving middle
some
school,
sort of spray tan
giving middle school girl at the dance stealing her boyfriend's hat
or something going on, and yeah, some kind of like polyester dress.
That's the thing that jumped out to me too. It's like the kind of sheen off of the polyester is so distinctly inexpensive. And I don't say that as a dig. I'm wearing like a $4 tank top right now that came in a pack of 3. But it is funny considering the context of, I think, what all of these people are trying to achieve aesthetically.
I mean, look, I wore so many hideous Forever 21 dresses in college. So this is definitely not shaming some college girl for wearing fast fashion. But I think what is sort of interesting about it is you have all of these young people sort of cosplaying wealth and cosplaying a specific sort of wealth, especially just the venue that they chose. It was this like old school downtown DC venue with like, 2 stories, beautiful giant crystal chandeliers, red velvet walls, like dark leather booths. Like it was meant to look like something from another era. But then you have this like garish kind of fashion on top of it, where it's like, it's the Shein dress, but it's also like the kind of the rental suit with the MAGA hat. And like, it's just, it looks so, there's something uncanny about it.
I feel like it's
trying to give old money, right? Like that's something we've talked about before, the aesthetic of old money, how people with new money, I'm not saying that that's who these people are, but how people with new money, like the Kardashians, have tried very hard to give off the aesthetic of having old money, of having been like generationally very wealthy. Like my great grandfather was one of the biggest oil barons in Texas.
Difficult to separate from influencer fashion culture. Like it's such a mirror image of what has become popular online. It's just like the fact that it is within this setting of like, we love Donald Trump, like we love authoritarianism and traditionalism specifically, like we love traditional American values, but so much of the aesthetic is inspired by just what's simply like trendy online.
Which is really the opposite of sort of traditional, quote unquote, conservative fashion. I mean, especially in the 80s, which these people love to sort of mimic the aesthetics of 80s Republicans. But that is a time when the preppy...
that is the 80s aesthetic is the most barstool type shit ever. So I think if you break it down, where older people, older conservatives are very very much so idolize the 50s. And then younger conservatives are like, hell yeah, the 80s are where it's at. I can't tell you how many millennial Gen Z finance bros I see wearing Reagan and Bush like vintage baseball hats or sweatshirts. It's a very, it's the 80s aesthetic is very appealing to the younger conservatives, especially conservative bros.
And book was trending, right? And was everyone's Bible. And it was this book that they all read, which quite literally describes like how to dress, what to wear. And it was very much about like conservatism and modesty and, wearing your...
Too obsessed with American Psycho and Patrick Bateman. Do you think that the rise of conservatism with youth can be attributed to an ever-increasingly unsure job market economy in general that makes people risk-averse in terms of rebellion and they acquiesce to old ideals? Like, I think people are too afraid to think for themselves in a way. Am I completely missing the mark? Thank you for putting 24 female. The rise of conservatism with youth. So, like, why did so many Gen Z people vote for Donald Trump? Well, absolutely the economic pressures they have been feeling that were picked up by people on the right who are telling them like, hey, we are Like, we hear you and we see you. And guess what? Liberals don't give a shit about you. And on top of that, they're just going to say that you're whiny and ungrateful and yada yada, especially if you're a young white man. They hate you. We care about you. Like, come over here. And, a big part of Donald Trump's appeal is that people see him as a guy who, like, talks the talk and speaks their language and is somebody who's paying attention to them. And the fact that he was doing like a non-traditional way of appearing on the media, and that it wasn't just doing 60 Minutes and an interview on a traditional news outlet. It was going on YouTube and podcasts and etc. So it's absolutely young people who are responding to their, responding to the economic pressures that they are experiencing, but are being swallowed up by the right, who is offering them what they see as a home, as like, hey, we hear you, and we are not just going to we're like, we are the side for you to become a part of. And so if you're a bro who feels like if you're a young dude who feels like things are just so hostile to young men, well, guess what? You're right. And that's because the left hates you. And if you're a young woman who's tired of being told that, you got to do all this feminism stuff and yada, yada. And, of course, young women's internalized misogyny is preyed upon, and it's why they are it's why they're pushed down these pathways of like traditional gender roles and embracing this very toxically masculine bro-y type of culture. People are desperate. Yes, people are desperate. And they are looking for, like, they're not just looking for politicians who are gonna make their lives better. They're also looking for, like, the vibes. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, to a lot of young people, didn't offer the right vibes. The vibes were not appealing. They're not into the vibes.
Mother's hand-me-down Brooks Brothers gown and shopping at Ralph Lauren and things like that. It was not about fashion. It was actually anti-trend. And that is not what we're seeing from this new generation of MAGA.
As part of this story for New
I
York,
think the tradwife trend is a reaction to worsening conditions under the current capitalist system, as people feel more desperate and want to look back to a time when things still work because there were no leaders offering a hopeful vision for the future right now. Yeah. So things suck right now, and the right is going, hey, guess what? Things suck because of woke, because of all this DEI bullshit, because of liberal brain rot. And so women, like, your life sucks because you're being forced to do all this stuff. Back in the day, women had it great. Women were super happy. You shouldn't feel ashamed if you want to be a mother. Don't let the dirty commies on the left tell you that you're worthless and should feel shame because you want to be a mother. Mother's the most important thing in the world. Like, blah, 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 blah. And for young men, they're like, hey, your dads and your grandpas, they had it a lot better than you do. And you want to know why that is? Because men were respected. Because we understood that men are men and women are women. And now it's a fucking mess. And so we need to go back to the way that things used to be. And then the Democrats are over here like, yeah, we will not do anything and change anything. And in fact, bye.
New York Magazine, there was a photo shoot that went along with it. The outline, which I have shared with Taylor and Kat, includes some of these photos.
That's their choice. It's not toxic to be a tradwife. Okay, so I'm talking about presenting this lifestyle where you return, where you embrace traditional gender roles, which are that the man is the dominant head of the house, that the woman is submissive, and it's being presented in a way that feminism is evil, right? That the women's movements have made things worse for women, and in fact, the 1950s was this glorious, great time for women, even though it was terrible. Like, women not having rights is not a good thing. So trying to return to a world where that is the case is not good. So what I'm saying is, I don't give a shit if you're like, I just want to be a mom and raise my kids, etc., etc. But if you are vulnerable because you are responding to the horrific conditions in society, and there is somebody who is presenting, hey, by the way, this is why you feel this way. These are the real problems, okay? And it is convincing you that we have gone too far in the direction of progress, and that actually we do need to embrace conservative traditional values, which means no, women shouldn't have the right to bodily autonomy, and that women's purpose is to be married and raise children and take care of the home. So again, no one is saying that women can't be moms and be stay-at-home moms. But there's a difference between being a stay-at-home mom and embracing this trad life as a backlash to women's progress. What's going on tonight, y'all? I don't know. Everybody took fucking annoying pills. Everybody decided that they were just going to be stupid tonight.
Actually, do one of you want to describe the photos?
Yeah, the one with like the girl with a cigarette in her hand and stuff.
It's a vape.
Oh, it's a vape. Oh my God. Even better. Well, I will say there wasn't a photo shoot. The photographer was kind of roaming around the party, kind of like in the moment party photos. You can tell how sloppy drunk all of these 20-year-olds are. This poor girl, like she's got a baseball hat on. She's got her phone on.
Just FYI, feminism means, hey, if you want to work. If you want to stay at home and be a mom, stay at home and be a mom. It's about having choice, okay? It's about having agency.
She's got her tongue out.
Yeah, this girl looks stupid. Can I be so honest? Can I tell you something so real? When I saw this New York Post story and I saw this picture of her with the vape, it was a motivating factor for me to quit vaping, because I went, damn, she looks stupid as fuck. She looks so stupid. I don't want to look like that. Now, of course, it's not just the vape, it's everything going on in this photo, but I will tell you that this picture was one that had me seriously rethinking my vape habits.
She's holding a giant glass of white wine while her dress is slipping down. It also looks like some sort of Shein situation. And she's holding a vape. And then another one, you've got, this blonde girl with her hair in a ponytail kind of like leaning over this table where clearly, they were selling like bottle service tables and stuff. You see this like sloppy drunk guy with a soaking wet button down. And this girl's leaning over and she's got this like lace bustier, however you say it. And like it's puckering and about to snap.
Can I tell you guys something? So when I used to work in clubs, I would get people like this all the time. Okay. I'd get like the young Gen Z, like just graduating college, just starting off in their, you know, finance, private sector jobs, whatever. And they come into the club and they go like 0 to 100. All right. They all come in sober and they're chill, and then they just get fucked up. And inevitably, come, I would say, 12:30 is when they start asking, hey, yeah, how do I buy cocaine? Every time. Like, this exact archetype of white young dude at the club getting bottle service going, yeah, hey, we want cocaine. I'm like, oh, do I look like a fucking drug dealer? Yeah. Oh, that's great. Everybody wants cocaine. Yeah. So, how do I get coke? Yeah, but here's the thing, okay? If you spend more money, then I can try and figure it out. Yeah, I think you need to buy at least 5 more bottles, and then I'll see what I can do. Yeah. A very Kendall Roy voice. Yeah, hey, how do I get some cocaine? I really need to, you know.
Like, it just looks so poorly made, but all of the photos are like very, very high contrast. There's a kind of like mocking nature to it.
What was so interesting to me was the range of very varied reactions that people had to these photos and this cover, where a lot of online conservatives were like, we're, you know, basically celebrated these photos and the whole story. And they were like, we're the cool kids. Like, look how much fun these rich, young, beautiful people are having.
That's what I'm talking about. The cool kids. That's the aesthetic. Hey, we're the popular cool kids. Don't you want to join our table?
They saw it as sort of a moment of celebration, whereas a lot of other people, including myself, saw especially the style of photography, which is so high contrast. And clearly the photos that they selected, especially including, like, I'm looking at this guy with like vodka dripping down his shirt. Like, it looks like so silly. I think this was well encapsulated in this tweet that went pretty viral, where one person wrote, "The Roaring 20s are back," in all caps, which, like, I think we're just confusing eras here, because I didn't get 20s from any of this. But Taylor, you were there.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I was like watching your Instagram story that night, and without any explanation, you just started posting photos of like Bryce Hall against like a Donald Trump backdrop. And I was like, Taylor, what are you doing? Like, you're always doing shit.
With Riley Gaines. I know.
I guess what I want to ask you is, are the Roaring 20s back?
I love someone quote tweeted that and was like, do you guys know what happened at the end of the Roaring 20s? Does anyone remember that? It's like how they,
a little history lesson.
I feel like didn't finish The Great Gatsby. Like, I think a lot of these people, they are like taking the wrong lessons away. Yeah, it was a bizarre scene. I mean, I was there to write this feature for Rolling Stone, which I wrote about. And obviously, because I covered these people, I mean, many of these people are people that I've covered for years. Bryce actually came up to me and we were talking about the Sway House, because he was also with Mark Moran. I don't know how you say his last name, from F-Boy Island. If you guys know that guy, he's like a finance influencer. But there's
and another big thing online is always this war of like, our side is the hot side, where conservatives will post photos of conservative women and be like, yeah, you know, libtards are just ugly, nasty women. Look at how hot our women are. It's all part of marketing. Okay, this is all marketing. This idea that if you sell the aesthetic and you sell the vibes, then more people are going to join. And it's also racism. Yeah, well, it's always white women that they hold up as like, look at how beautiful, like, we have Melania Trump, who do you have, type of thing. And so when that New York Post story came out, conservatives were all over that shit, sharing the photos and being like, see, our side is sexy and knows how to have a good time.
just so many people at this party that I was like, oh yeah, I haven't seen you in a minute. Like, I didn't realize you're fascist now, you know, like I covered your content house in 2018 or something. And here you are. But it was, again, these like young people trying to sort of cosplay a different era. And everyone was so drunk.
Another piece of content that went really viral from this party was a picture that was tweeted by one of the other girls on the cover, not the 21-year-old girl from SMU, even though she is in this photo, but it's another one of these girls, blonde, white, young, beautiful. It's her and three other girls over there. It's 4 girls standing in this photo, and she writes, "This is the new right." And I just saw this and I was like, these are 4 young white women.
Yeah, no, baby, they just look like they look like their grandmas did, but in the 50s.
Thin. And I tweeted this and people got really mad at me. I was like, I'm looking at like a Hitler youth camp photo. And it's kind of the essence of what I want to talk about in this episode. So much of the aesthetic around what is cool in like the MAGA youth movement now, and what's not only is it cosplay as like old money that a lot of these people don't come from, but it's also like this emphasis on yes, on Eurocentric beauty standards, but like on sameness. When I saw this photo where she was like, "This is the new right," I thought I was going crazy. I started looking at these
also, the other thing is, you guys, what was interesting to me, and I really started to pay attention to, was the infighting, was the MAGA infighting. So back during the RNC, when you had like loser boomers wearing the ear patches, there were a lot of the younger MAGA type online, the ones who would be at this type of party, being like, "Oh my God, they're so embarrassing. Like we are separate from them. Like, that's boomer MAGA. Those are the Facebook." It's kind of the same with how there's always the age gap on, of any political party. But it was just wild to see it happening within MAGA, because you always kind of think of MAGA as very cohesive, as kind of monolithic, when the reality was you have this divide of the young MAGA who look at the ear patches and all that stuff as really embarrassing. And they're like, this is why MAGA gets a bad rep. And we're trying to show that actually MAGA is cool. Actually, we're all like sexy and we party and we're rich and blah, blah, blah.
Photos from
I cannot say enough that it is about marketing. Okay, we're talking about vibes. We're talking about trying to sell something to people. And like, young people don't think wearing an ear patch to match Donald Trump's is cool, but they do think that like wearing a shirt with a picture of Trump's face on it with grills and doing a live stream with him is cool.
Their youth camps, which I put in the outline, they would have these like ones where they like taught all the girls gymnastics so they could perform routines for the Nazis. And it's just like thin white woman after thin white woman after thin white woman, like dancing in their little ballet slippers. Ballet, which is like ballet core, is also a thing that's now in. Yeah, I tweeted, "Fascism is fascism. The new right simply wears Fashion Nova." People were not happy with me for that, but I think it's a valid take.
I thought that was a good take and correct.
Looking at these young women, it really transports me to my college experience where I worked in a like student newsroom where we covered politics in Ohio. And I had a fellow student who I worked with who was beautiful white blonde woman. And this woman who I'm thinking of, after she graduated school, she went on to work for like Ron DeSantis and like in big Republican offices. I think she also interned at the Heritage Foundation. And she, like in college, she just integrated so seamlessly into our very diverse social circle that was like very leftist, very liberal, lots of like people who did not later become conservative or were not conservative. And I feel like she was the minority. But when I look at pictures like this, I'm like, this group of people has desired and has now become sort of like the majority thing driving the culture.
Yes. Because I will always repeat this about right-wing tradcon red pill aesthetics. Every aspect of this worldview is built around a fictional long past America that's literally just a GE washing machine ad. Like, I remember when my moment here is when I met that one girl, Emily, who goes by Emily Saves America. Okay, she was like, probably saw everything that Tommy Loren was doing and was like, I'm gonna do that, but be even hotter and even worse. And when I first met her, I met her at a party in LA, and I was like, did not know who she was, what her political views are. And obviously we didn't talk about politics. We talked about Aaron Taylor Johnson and how hot he was. And then he ended up showing up to that party. And so we bonded and blah, 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 blah. And she was funny and she was pretty and yada, yada. And then she's like, I'm going to follow you on Instagram. I was like, cool. I'm going to follow you. I'll follow you back. And that night I started going through her Instagram and I was like, what? Oh my God. Like, the first video was her talking about how, like, railing against trans people, aka Tommy Loren, without being pro-choice. Yes. And how her entire thing was being like hot, cool MAGA girl. But the fact that, like, when I first had met her, because I met her, out in the real world, and enjoyed meeting her, I thought she was funny, like I said. She seemed like just a hot, funny LA girl. And then I find out that, her content is just absolutely atrocious and in opposition to, like, everything that I believe. I grew up around so many white people who are now in college and look exactly like that. As a brown person, the shit I heard from them growing up was insane. That's why it's crazy, like, to say this is the new right. No, this has always been what it is. Whether they were white women screaming at black people integrating into white schools, or they were like the girls who would bully you because you didn't look like them in junior high. Like, girls who look exactly like that were who bullied me when I was growing up. It's always been the same. It's always been like this has always been the look, the aesthetic, the vibe.
Because in college, when you would go to big parties, there was like a liberal culture at the time. And what I feel like MAGA youth have been trying to do and are arguably doing is they've taken that majority culture and they've now associated it with their political ideology much more overtly, obviously, than I think a lot of, like, liberal college students even 8 years ago did.
Yeah, totally. I would like to take a quick break from the show to give a shout out to Rocket Money
while he's doing his ad read. How do you think this will flow onto Hollywood? What do you mean? Like, how has conservatism infiltrated Hollywood? Well, that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, where Hollywood, which is a part of the pop culture landscape, has been infiltrated by conservatism, whether it is like independent film companies cropping up to push out conservative films, real right-wing films, or it's like Donald Trump assigning his Hollywood ambassadors, aka three old-ass boomers who it's like, yeah, okay, they really know what's going on in Hollywood. Or it's like the digital influencer aspect that has become a part of Hollywood, where they are creating content and very much a big part of the pop culture landscape, and are pushing this conservative belief system.
So we started at this event that was then the subject of this New York Magazine cover. And I want to broaden a little bit, and we've been kind of doing this anyway, but into the fetishization of trad culture. And we've all talked about tradwives, right? We all know Nara Smith, and we all know, like, this sort of facade of traditional living that involves like, first of all, making like 6 to 7 figures on your popular TikTok account while like baking bread for 7 hours a day, even though you have an assistant. Tradwives, I feel like, have become sort of like a cultural punchline, but on a less absurd level than spending 7 hours a day to like make homemade chewing gum for your children. It feels like on some level, like this whole youth movement is like a similar performance to what tradwives have been.
Well, I feel like this performance of conservatism is sort of, it's a lot of people that just sort of want to hop on the bandwagon, I guess. Like, I mean, especially with these influencers, like they're not, like you said, they're not old money people. Like they're not, and we can get into like that aesthetic and stuff. Conservatism is conservatism. It always has the sort of the same aesthetic because it is Eurocentric, white, thin. You kind of know what these people look like. There's Republican hair, Republican makeup. Like,
wait, who's got that one tweet of who's got the tweet of the girl who's like, Republican makeup looks like this? Like she posted a picture. You guys know what I'm talking about? Somebody knows that tweet. The irony is that Nara originally started baking from scratch because she has lupus, and now it's changed to that. Yeah, because it's very lucrative. You can make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money as a successful tradwife influencer. GDW, thank you for the tier 1. Republican makeup all over my FYP on TikTok. Yeah, you guys know what tweet I'm talking about. Yes, thank you. See, you're so fast. You guys could do this so much faster than I ever could. Republican makeup. Like the foundation that is 5 shades too dark. The overusage of bronzer and blush, the really thickly drawn eyebrows and eyeliner, and then nude lipstick. It's giving clown makeup.
What I'm talking about when I say that, everyone at Fox has it. So I think like these young people are sort of
giving Trump. Yeah, not just darker foundation, but also orange. Yeah. Hey, give me the Trump.
Trying to cosplay into that. But I think it's also just like in the culture, like we're moving towards a more conservative culture right now. And so you're seeing that play out aesthetically in the rise of a lot of these fashion trends. I wrote about like quiet luxury and the clean girl aesthetic, or, just some of these like trends that are sort of associated with the whiteness of so many of these micro trends.
Well, this kind of comes to a head at another tweet that I saw on my timeline. My entire thought process is guided by viral tweets that make me upset. But
yes, it's very much so Brittany Mahomes.
But a tweet came across my timeline that just made me roll my eyes so hard, but I didn't really think twice about it. Someone by the name of Miss White tweeted, "Casual parties at Lake Como," with a video of what looks like a ballroom and a bunch of young people in their 20s. The men are wearing tuxedos with black bow ties. There's some women in like silky dresses who are like dancing. It's like there's like piano music in the background. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like I'm looking at a video of a country club or something. And then I learned that that was not the case. Take it away, Taylor.
It's not the case. I wrote an article about this, but the people in this video pay 6,000 euros a year, which is almost $10,000, I think, to be part of an Instagram old money club where they all dress up together and they rent out these sort of different locations to cosplay as old money and shoot old money content.
Nice.
And I thought it was hilarious.
Like, if there weren't fascist undertones to this, like, I could appreciate the bit. Like, I love someone who hustles. I love, like, if you're not hurting anybody, I love like an extreme facade. Like paying $6,000, it's amazing.
It's also
amazing.
just so funny because it doesn't need to cost that much. Like everyone is like, you can just like dress up like this and like hire a photographer for like way cheaper.
They're totally being scammed.
They're being scammed, but and also just the website is hilarious. Like it is this like Gen Z e-commerce entrepreneur and an old money content creator.
But that people will look at that and be like, oh man, how aspirational. Man, I wish that I could be a part of that. They look so elegant, so old school, so, so glamorous. The sleek, oiled up hair is so in now because upper class white women made it trend, but when black and brown women of the world did it decades ago, it was sticky and unclean. Oh yeah, I talked about that on the podcast probably a couple months ago when we were discussing the clean girl aesthetic. Yeah, that's usually the case. Where if something is a trend now that white people are engaging in, just know that it probably comes from black and brown culture, but was once upon a time looked down upon.
So I wrote this feature actually for Town and
it.
Country almost 2 years ago when the old money trend started to kick
I thought everyone knew clean girls from black and brown. No.
off. And almost no one who participates in this trend is old. None of them actually are old, quote unquote, old money. Anyone that's actually quote unquote old money does not have an Instagram.
No, people think clean girl is from Hailey Bieber. Like they think that Hailey Bieber and other white influencer girlies like her who have really mainstreamed the clean girl aesthetic, they think that that's where that comes from.
Like they are not posting on Instagram at all. Like they're not on the internet, let's be real. So it was just so funny because these are all like hustle bro type people. And when you look at the website, it's riddled with spelling errors, but it's selling this like aesthetic and this dream. And I thought it was interesting too that all the members highlighted on the website are men, but they have women in their pictures. I'm like, are these women like paying members or what? But
well, wait, but you haven't even said what the name of the club is.
Oh yeah. The club, which again, by the way, has no physical location. They just like rent out ballrooms to shoot Instagram content in, is called the Tuxedo Society,
nice.
Which is also the most corny name ever. It's like, well, also people don't call it a tuxedo. They call it a whatever they call it. What do rich people call it? They call it a fucking
I don't know,
a dinner jacket, right?
What?
Hold on. They call it. I just want to confirm it.
Oh, oh no, I'm thinking of smoking shoes. Or do they call it a smoking jacket? Or is that not a thing?
No, a dinner jacket.
A dinner jacket?
A dinner jacket. No, they call it a dinner jacket.
It's just the name Tuxedo Society tickled me so much. And like the front banner on the website, which by the way, since you reported on this, Taylor, they've made the website private, which I thought was funny.
Womp womp.
Impact point.
My impact journalism. I'm shutting the membership down of the Tuxedo Society, guys. It's over.
But thankfully we have screenshots, and the banner says over like a stock photo of like some guys outside of some country club, the most exclusive club dedicated to the finest experiences in the most iconic places of all time. Apply for membership. Like, what does that even mean? It really tickled me.
It's iconic and exclusive.
There's also so many grammatical errors. I'm like...
This reminds me of like a mashup of two things. One, that fake airplane where you can, the fake private jet set where you can go if you're like an influencer or you're an aspiring influencer.
Oh yeah. If you don't know, a lot of times when you see influencers on private jets, they're not actually on a private jet. Okay. There's a lot of things that influencers do to make their lifestyles seem aspirational and that they're jet setting off all over the world. And they have all this designer stuff. A lot of times that designer stuff they do not own. They are not on an actual private jet. So just pulling back the curtain here. Pulling back the curtain in reminding you that it's all about selling an aesthetic. Influencers are salespeople. They are selling you on their lifestyles being extremely glamorous.
You like go and take pictures in like the model of a fake private jet, and like people on Instagram, you can come to recognize the jet and like see it on influencers' posts. It's like that concept mixed with Andrew Tate and like the Cobra Tate Academy whole shtick. It's like making money off of this desire to project wealth, which is what so much of influencer culture has always been. And there was a post I saw on Blue Sky recently that was like, the desire to hoard wealth and like hoarding wealth is inherently like conservative. It's inherently like going to take you down a path of fascism. And I was like, oh, well, it all makes so much sense. Like that influencer culture has reached this very overtly conservative point. It's like, of course, even though influencers for a long time
like this, yeah, this guy's the worst of them all. Do not believe his lies. Do not believe his lies.
Projected liberal politics to be popular and relevant. Down, like, below that.
Yes, so, great example. Logan Paul holding up a Black Lives Matter sign. Do you want to know why Logan Paul held that up? I'm going to give you a hint. It's not because Logan Paul actually cares about Black people achieving equality. Okay, he doesn't care about civil rights. The reason that Logan Paul held up the Black Lives Matter sign was because it was popular, was because it was cool. Everybody was posting the black squares. Everybody had, like, literally, I have been at protests before and I have seen it, like, people roll up, okay, dressed in an outfit that they specifically picked for the photo shoot they are about to do, take some pictures, like borrow a sign, take some pictures, and then leave. It was trendy. It was popular. It was part of an aesthetic. So that's how, if you're like, well, how does Logan Paul go from advocating for Black Lives Matter to, endorsing Donald Trump? Well, that's because this isn't about actual ideology, right? This isn't about like having any type of real belief system.
That they were always operating out of conservative influence, like impulses.
Fundamentally, influencers, quote unquote, content creators, they're small business owners, right? And small business owners in America have always leaned and voted conservative because you do end up becoming quite conservative when you are a small business owner. You want your taxes to be like, a lot of times you end up voting for these sorts of policies. And I think, like you said, also just the aspirational nature of it. I think it's funny too that like, as new money wealth became so much more common on the internet, especially throughout the 2010s, with these people like these drop shipping entrepreneurs and whatever, now we have people chasing this other sort of type of wealth that is inherently more exclusive, right? Like anybody can get the private jet photo. Now we want the, Lake Como elite, like it's like, it's sort of this like next level of wealth, which they actually will never be able to access because it is completely shut off from social media. The people in that world are inherently anti-social media. I mean, it's like why the richest people don't want themselves out there. It's like, there's they don't want the public scrutiny.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just like in my life, I've met like some people who are extraordinarily wealthy. And the thing about them is like, they all have private Instagrams with 200 followers. They aren't posting every little thing. And ContraPoints made a video that talked about this really succinctly, which is basically just that people who grow up with immense amounts of wealth, like people who are taking private jets everywhere, people who are living the lives that these like TikTokers are pretending to live because it's on trend right now, they know not to advertise it because it'll make people jealous. And you don't want to have jealousy towards you. It's the whole thing with the evil eye. They know that like posting photos of their home puts them at a safety risk.
It's also about exclusivity and privacy. And it's very much about tightly controlling your group. I mean, these are people that also do not want random interlopers knowing who they are and trying to grift off them. Like that's why all those nice clubs in New York City that are actually like old money, like doubles and stuff, right? Like they don't allow photography. They want to remain anonymous. They want to kind of fly below the radar because that it's about exclusivity, and the internet is inherently not about exclusivity. It's about like constructing an image for consumption.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of old money conservatives view young money or new money or influencers who advertise a wealthy type of lifestyle. They view them as trash. They do not consider them to be a part of the same elite circles that they are in, that they have been in for generations, because they have been enormously wealthy for generations. Like, that is a separate, very elite group of people who are not opening the doors for like the Kim Kardashians or Logan Pauls to walk through.
So it's sort of at odds. Also, if you're raised in that sort of like waspy, like true quote unquote old money culture, or like old sort of European culture, it's also like there's this idea of like modesty and not putting yourself out there and attracting any attention. This is why they were so sort of against influencer culture to begin with, because it's about like being private and not centering yourself publicly for consumption.
The other example I put of this kind of like performative old money thing, which it really just tickles me, was this like kind of low level right wing trying to be influencer person on Twitter. Her name is Madame Temu. She tweeted 2 photos with the caption "Degens with an air of aristocracy." And the first one is like a mirror selfie where she's in an elevator, again looking with like a Fashion Nova type black dress and like a faux fur shawl. Temu. And then the second one is at like a house party. It's like it looks like one of these like new build apartments where it's like they make everything look really modern, but it's also very clearly like cheaply made, and like the IKEA table, but like they're all wearing like ball gowns and like tuxedos. And there's my favorite detail here is there's an air fryer in the back.
Somebody called out, what did the whiteboard say?
Yes, there's a whiteboard in the back. which in like, messy handwriting says goals/to do. And the first thing on that list is secure the bag.
Right. Imagine, right. Nothing says old money. Nothing says old money like a whiteboard in your kitchen that says secure the bag.
This literally is...
It says, what does that say? Goals and to do.
Very reminiscent of my own actual apartment that I live in.
Totally. First of all, this is like this kitchen is nicer than mine. Like, I'm not hating on it. It's just so,
mine too.
like,
I have a galley kitchen. Like,
no,
yeah.
But it's so like newly gentrified like part of town where it's like we just did a slapdash dot and everything is plastic vinyl, like not real.
Like, okay, here's another example. So I have met a number of people who fall into the category of old money, and they tend to be boomers. They are it's their families own like the company that makes every single bottle in this country, and a lot of them, of course, probably all of them, vote they vote Republican, and they voted for Donald Trump. But the difference is that they will express that they don't personally care for Donald Trump. They find him obnoxious. They find him gauche, from his gold encrusted penthouse to the way that the way that he loves to show off wealth, to the things that he says. They find him crass. They don't consider him to be a person that a person that they find tasteful in any way. But of course they vote for him because of the policies that he passes that benefit them, because they always vote Republican. And so they will vote their interests while simultaneously being like, yes, but Donald Trump is obnoxious and I don't personally like him.
There's not an ounce of real wood in that entire place.
100%. One time, a picture of my dishwasher went viral on Reddit in the apartment that I currently live in. I know, ridiculous. But
One time a picture of my dishwasher went viral on Reddit.
And people were dragging the build of my apartment, and it was really, I'm glad that I know all this information, but they were like, you cannot open your dishwasher right after the dish cycle is done because your cabinets are not made of wood. They're made of cheap wood scrap. And they were like, if steam gets on them too often, they will crumble. And I was like, oh, I live in a house of cards. Okay, good to know.
At least you had a dishwasher in New York City. I feel like that's luxury.
No, it's true. I should be in this photo. I'm like, do these people know what the word aristocracy means? Could they describe it? I don't think they could.
No, but it's also I think it's so telling that this is what they aspire to, which is this repressive, horrible, white supremacist, fucked up culture, right? It's like that the things that they're aspiring to is this highly regressive class system.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of the getting into the bigger picture of what we're talking about, which is if you want to put on a nice dress or a cheap version of something that looks like a nice dress, do it. I don't care if you want to wear a faux fur shawl, do it. I don't care. The point of this is not to be honestly pay somewhere to give you a nice Instagram photo backdrop. I don't care. I wouldn't care if the undertone of all of this, right? The cool kids table, the tuxedos with vodka spilled on them, the Shein dresses that are supposed to look like 80s Republican dresses, kind of. It's the backdrop of all of this is everyone faking the aesthetic of white supremacy and fascism, which is what they want. That's the only reason I'm making an episode. If people were dressing in a way that I found off-putting, that's a tweet for the group chat.
Yeah, it's not about what they wear. And also, by the way, anyone can dress like that. Not all people that dress super preppy 80s style, right, are fascist or conservatives. I think it's just interesting to look at the resurgence of this specific sort of 80s style Republican aesthetic alongside the rise of all of these other aesthetics that really center whiteness, coupled with the rise of conservative ideologies. And also, by the way, the people that are that are dressing in these ways and pushing these aesthetics are also espousing right-wing politics. So I just feel like it's important to talk about all of it together. You know what I mean? Because individually it's fine. And also, I wrote about this in my piece too, Matt. I don't know if you saw it, but there was this fashion expert, I think they spoke to The Guardian, talking about just in certain economic times and under certain economic conditions, or when we're seeing certain political movements, we do see aesthetic trends rise around those political movements. And so much of fashion is tied with politics and the political sort of ideology of the moment. And so I think it's just interesting to unpack.
Something that
you even look at the MAGA hat, right? The MAGA hat once upon a time was red. That was it. You saw a red hat and you would have a Pavlovian response because the red hat became synonymous with MAGA. And then as MAGA diversified, right, as MAGA grew, they introduced more colors of the MAGA hat. Elon Musk, who always has the dark MAGA hat, he wears the black Make America Great hat. And that just being, an example of how something that is a core part of a large group of people in this country has diversified in the options that they are offering. Just look at the history of Coco Chanel. Oh yes, if you don't know, Coco Chanel was a Nazi.
I keep coming back to when I look at these young conservatives now that we're in Trump's second term, and they have this air of we won, we got what we wanted. It's when you look at what.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but the fashion of Nazi Germany and how a lot of the history of fascism, the history of fashion being tied up with fascism.
a lot of them seem to have clearly wanted. It's that they wanted to have the direction and flow of popular culture like reinforce a system of power that was beneficial to them. So like with these influencer types, if you go back 10 years ago, they were engaging with popular culture and succeeding at it, but popular culture at the time valued more diversity. It valued more liberal politics. It valued inclusivity and social justice and things that like didn't
Kim
truly
Kardashian
benefit the members of this group that we're seeing now. And so their aim and their goal was to dominate popular culture and then turn it conservative so that it would benefit them at the expense of all of those other people who previously had this hold on the culture. And so I think it's also disturbing that so many people who are just kind of like blindly consuming like this conservative content sphere are not like thinking it through that direction, because it leaves people more vulnerable to falling into the same thought patterns. Like people who just consume a lot of popular culture uncritically now are getting way more conservative messaging than before.
Yes, this is what I was talking about before, where you know, it doesn't matter if you are on the left, and so your home pages will be ostensibly the accounts that you follow. It doesn't work like that anymore, especially not when the people who are running these social media platforms are pushing conservatism. Like that is being fed to you whether you want it or not. And I think using this example here of Kim Kardashian, where, you know, they pulled up the post where she wrote Black Lives Matter, and now here Kim Kardashian posting Melania Trump, a picture of Melania Trump, because I guess she's admiring her hamburger outfit. But how, you know, this is a change also from the first time that Donald Trump was president, in that there is a not just normalization, but acceptance of Trump and everyone around him. And in, you know, many regards, people like Kim, who's one of the biggest influencers in the world, is giving her stamp of approval by pointing out how great she thinks Melania looks.
It's like soft power in terms of how shaping how America thinks and how America ultimately like votes and chooses to enforce power.
And also, like you said, it is all of these sort of coded messages. And I think we're seeing it also come out with beauty standards that have regressed back. It's like thin is in again. Like, you know, it is this very like Eurocentric beauty, white. I mean, Raquel De Bono, who co-hosted the influencer party, she leads this whole movement called Make America Hot Again, which is just about really just pushing Eurocentric beauty standards and eliminating, you know, quote unquote fatties and people like that. Like they also just all want to say slurs. They really just want to say slurs. Like I can't explain how many slurs I heard at that party. Like they just want to say it. Like you said, Kat, they've wanted to feel centered in culture, and they're too young to remember when they were centered in, like, you know, they didn't live through the 80s or the 90s when they were centered in culture. And so they feel like they haven't had their moment, and they want to regress the culture back to focus around them. And that's why they feel like they want to go back. And you see this, like, I think resurgence even of like the early aughts culture in terms of like that sort of chauvinistic male culture where it's like, let's call women slurs, let's you know, bring back the R word. All these things were normalized in 2005. Like you said, it's soft power, and it's kind of this messaging that then it's very easy to sort of amass an audience around.
I think that's like a theme with all of this kind of romanticizing the past, is that the people who are doing the romanticizing, right? The women in these photos, the women who were at that party and then on the New York Magazine cover, they didn't live.
Like, I'm sorry, if you are basing your political choices on whether or not you feel the freedom to say slurs, you're a fucking loser. I don't know what else to say. You're a dumbass loser. Woohoo, congratulations. Do you have health care? Now that you feel you have the freedom to say slurs again, has that changed your life, your economic conditions?
Through the time that they are romanticizing.
It's like the whole Make America Great Again thing. It's like, we don't want to go back to the 1950s. Most of the people.
Do you think this yearning for attention is something unique to this generation, or one that feels they cannot relate to the one prior? Well, I think what Taylor was saying there is that they have this desire to, return to a different decade. And in this, we've been talking about the 80s and how there's been this huge embrace of like 80s aesthetic, not in a cool way. And that's because they're responding to the second half of the 2000s when they all came of age and feeling like there was not a place for them in culture, that, pop culture was no longer just dominated by all things Eurocentric. And so they are yearning, like the thing is too, is that they're yearning for the past because their present day is not good. And it's not just, young white people who are suffering under the current economic and social conditions, but young white people, when we look at the youth overall, young straight white people were a large part of Donald Trump's success this past election. I noticed the other day that I haven't heard anyone say the R word in person as far as I can remember until recently. Yeah, because Make America Great Again means...
Voting, by the way, were not adults in the
can.
1950s. They were not women in the 1950s. All these tradwife influencers, they were never around when women didn't have another option, right?
Absolutely. And it's the trad wives, and it's also just like these college students who are like, I want to be at an elegant party in Lake Como, effortless in my dress, and we're wearing, I don't know, Brooks Brothers. I don't even know.
It's why every time there's a casting announcement of a big Marvel film where, a black guy is going to play Captain America, or Jesus Christ Superstar, where Cynthia Erivo, a black lesbian woman, is going to play Jesus Christ, or Romeo and Juliet, where a black actress is going to play the role of Juliet, or a queer person has been cast in this, or whatever. We have the film that's all female leads. Like there is now the inevitable backlash, outcry, anger over that casting. Like every single time now, we know to expect that these people are going to be pissed off and then wave the, DEI flag around because they use it as a slur.
What these people are trying to wear. But but it's like you're romanticizing a time from when, like,
and so sorry, just to finish. So it's all part of the same thinking that diversity has ruined this country, whether it's because, whether it's the planes are crashing because of diversity, or pop culture has been ruined, film has been ruined because of diversity.
You couldn't own a credit card.
Another thing that
Video
bothers
games
me
have
so
been
much
ruined
about this is
because
it's
of
reactionary toward a status quo that never truly existed. Because it's like when you look at white Eurocentric beauty ideals and standards, those have always been what is the dominant force in culture. There has never been a true time when like these people did not have the power that they crave.
Yes!
Their biggest issue is that like marginalized people started to make very small inroads toward progress, and so they felt the need to like crush it and be 10 times harder, because it's like this whole idea that
that's exactly what it is. It's like, oh, you don't have 100% of the pot now. Oh yeah, things are so terrible. Like that, the reason that things are terrible is because you no longer have 100% of the pot. So we need to go back to a time when you do have 100% of the pot and everything is going to be fixed. Did you see girls cry on TikTok over a fan cast of Rapunzel being an Indian woman? It's so dumb. And it's every single time now. You will just see a TikTok or a tweet or, Ben Shapiro going on a rant, whatever it is, it is just always the same backlash.
Like, thin people were discriminated against. Like, everyone, it's ridiculous. It's like, actually, like, fat people have never been treated with dignity and respect in the past, like, many decades of America.
Yeah, like when what's her name? Why am I blanking? From Bridgerton. Love her, Irish actress. What's her name? Irish actress. We love her. Nicola. Yeah, Nicola Coughlan. Nicola Coughlan, who was the core of season 3 of Bridgerton. It was her love story with the Bridgerton guy, and like the disgusting opinion pieces that were tearing her apart because she's fat, and how fat people, can't be romantic leads, but also how like this is an example of how wokeism has ruined the culture. And it's like, first of all, like, when have fat people been romantic leads in film and television? So to act like this is some common thing now is ridiculous. But secondly, that the story was invalidated, that the entire the being immersed in a show that is fictional is ruined because the romantic female lead is a fat actress. My immersion.
In American culture, like, we've never had a time where obesity was truly glorified. It's a lie to like create this like reactionary fervor.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of like, there was a brief moment like 6 months ago where conservative men figured out who Sydney Sweeney was.
Yes.
And then they were like, wokeness has died under the heel of Sydney Sweeney's beauty. And it was like, okay, you could just think she's
Yeah, but then they'll also post that Sydney Sweeney is mad.
hot. Like, you don't have to be insane about it.
I also think, and like they do this repeatedly, when there is a white woman who is really dominant in the culture, Taylor Swift being the perfect example, conservatives try to claim that woman, whether she wants them to or not. And like, because Taylor Swift, for example, has publicly been like, I'm a Democrat, I vote for Democrats, I endorse them, conservatives then make like deep fakes of her supporting Trump, because when a white woman is culturally powerful, conservatives want to take her power and rebrand it as like conservatism's power.
You mentioned the clean girl aesthetic. And I know, especially for young women listening to this podcast, just the term clean girl aesthetic probably like...
Yeah, the internet really loves to turn public figures into neo-Nazis. It's a favorite pastime.
Raises the hairs on your neck. The clean girl aesthetic is a sort of fashion trend that really came to dominate TikTok over the last couple years. Its hallmarks are, like beige suits, thin white women wearing gold jewelry, big sunglasses.
I remember like 5 years ago, first time I heard Asmongold was when he said only white people should be in the Lord of the Rings universe. Well, he's correct, because historically elves and hobbits were white. So if you want to be historically accurate, then you should cast white actors as elves and hobbits in the non-fictional Middle Earth that existed in the real world, that is part of real history.
Minimal makeup, just like a little like cream blush and like laminated eyebrows. It's very effortless. It's very white. And a couple years ago, and Kat, you sent me this essay, so thank you. Steffi Sau wrote for her Substack an essay titled "White Women Want Their Power Back." And it basically talked about how when she was coming of age in the mid 2010s, it was cool and every white woman was
He is the
basically
real
trying
goblin, that's
to
true.
look black with cornrows, with BBLs, with lip filler, with spray tans that just like bordered on the edge of blackface. And since then, she writes, many of the remnants of this era have fallen out of vogue, super out of vogue. Everywhere you look, there's a new aesthetic to aspire to. Clean girl, coastal grandmother, old money, beige mom, vanilla girl,
grandmother.
frazzled 2000s English woman, hard-boiled egg girls. I'm not on TikTok. I don't know what any.
What the fuck is hard-boiled egg girls? We've gone too far, okay? You know what? I do agree we've gone too far. We've gone too far in the sense that we have hard-boiled egg girls.
That all fixate on one thing, whiteness.
It's such a good piece. I think about this essay. Stephanie, if you're listening to this, I love you. It's so good. I think about it all the time. It's one of my primary bookmarks because I always want to come back to it. It was so prescient because she picked up on this thing, which is that white women are like becoming more conservative, and the culture at large is becoming more conservative. And I feel like Kim Kardashian, and this has been much discussed, but like she really exemplifies this, and the Kardashians in general, the way that they created an artificial body type that was reminiscent of Black women's features and then artificially undid that body type so that they could conform to like a stick thin, like glorifying white women whole shtick, and that extends into so many facets of like their personal lives and their public brand. But Kim Kardashian in her era where she was more overt.
Yeah, you guys, they also do that with the men that they date. They all dated or were married to or had babies with Black men. And then once they switched their aesthetic, like literally changed their bodies, changed their faces again to fit this very, skinny, white, Eurocentric look, they all also switched the type of men that they were with. It's wild. If you track the Kardashians are a case study that should never ever be overlooked. And you may dismiss them and be like, okay, I can't stand them or like whatever. But to ignore the influence that the Kardashians have on culture and how the Kardashians are always at the forefront when we are talking about these various aesthetics is you can't ignore them. Who's Kim dating now? I don't know who Kim's dating now, but Kim, started dating like Pete Davidson, a couple other white guys. Kylie dating Timmy. Kendall dated what didn't she like Bad Bunny? So not a white guy, but like they moved away from appropriating Black culture in every aspect of their lives. And they're not the only ones, though. Like the Kardashians, because they are at the forefront of these trends and, these aesthetics, when they do something, then other people follow in kind. You even look at Ariana Grande, right? I saw this side by side of Ariana Grande 4 years ago when she had the super duper dark fake tan and the ponytail, and she was like just using AAVE. He's kind of Bad Bunny, who is not Black, I will say. And Blackiana, I think, is what the tweet had called her. Blackiana versus then Ariana once she embraced like the Glinda, very soft spoken, like, yes, I'm super blonde and super pale and very tiny and I talk like this now. And just the side by side difference was wild. It was wild to see the gulf between them. Yeah, now she's Ariana Grande.
Overtly appropriating Black women, she was like, I support Hillary Clinton. And then now that she's in her like thin Marilyn Monroe era, she's like, Melania on my Instagram story.
Right.
Love the fashion. A lot of these women who do these conservative heel turns are like, it's about the fashion. Like Jessica Reed Krause is like, I love the drama and the hellish intrigue of the White House, and I love the fashion. And also, I support Trump, and if you don't, like, unfollow me now.
I mean, I think this just goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is that there has been an evolution. And when we had a more liberal culture, we did have a more sort of slightly more diverse beauty standard. It was always very Eurocentric and white, and Kat said, like, thin has never been out. Let's be real. Like, models have all generally looked the same, but it was just like, hey, maybe if you're slightly diverse,
Was it this? It was not this, but this is an example too. Hold on.
Come on, girl. I'm like, bitch, that's my cookie. That's my juice, okay?
Blackiana core.
Thank you, next.
Kill me, get your ass in here.
Kill me.
Come on, girl.
Oh, wow, you just fucking it.
Anything to you about Mac?
You know, I love my Mac. This is the Mac I'm here to talk about.
Like, contrast this to the Ariana Grande doing PR for Wicked and her being like, you know, we just really care about each other and love each other so much, and just how pale and blonde and not Blackiana she is.
People took my quote and made a headline out of it. I know what y'all do. Of course. Well, you said it. We gotta run with it. No. They twisted it, though. All right, so that is not what I said.
I'm like, bitch.
And you might appear as like the diversity hire in an ad campaign or something for Dove. But now we're seeing the complete backlash to that. And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to a conservative influencer recently who was telling me that a bunch of brands are now trying to do these conservative influencer outreach campaigns. And now brands have realized that this is what's in. They have the culture. One women's beauty brand, hosted a big roundtable event for all of these super, super right-wing women influencers.
Wait, which brand?
I might write. I'm trying to write about it. But
All right.
Subscribe to.
Wait, you mean brands are performative in their activism? You mean they actually don't have morals and progressive beliefs? And that's why they're as quick to drop the trans flag and then jump on the conservative cultural train? It's like, you know, the same companies who advertise during Pride Month who have now will drop pride and diversity from their businesses because Donald Trump's in the White House, because the culture has changed.
Userbag.co, because I am going to write about some of this. But let me tell you something. They're not the only one. All of these brands are on board with it. Like, all of these brands, their goal is to sell things, and they're thrilled that these unattainable beauty standards are back, by the way. Like, this is like a lucrative aesthetic for them. It's a very unattainable aesthetic. And I think a lot of companies are eager to work with this new generation of influencers.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that do you think that brands prefer this a slogan of, you know, you're beautiful no matter what, like big is beautiful, like diversity is beautiful, or do you think that they want to sell, actually this is what beauty is and you should buy these products if you want to look this way, because this is what the standard is?
Inherently very right wing.
Damn.
You know what else would be profitable for the beauty companies? If we reverted back to 2016 eyebrows when everyone looked like a drag queen. That's what I want to go back to.
Okay, like, that was so shady on his part and very funny. That was quite the jump scare. James Charles, when do you think the culture will switch back? How long do you think it'll be before things flip again? Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but that's why, like, I started this off by saying those of us on the left who cover pop culture and are influencers and are, you know, the antithesis to all this that we have talked about. We have to go even harder. Like, we can't stop. We gotta, we need to keep going, because the culture has shifted, because the right has co-opted and continues to co-opt pop culture, because you know, pop culture is a way for reactionaries to further spread their beliefs and bring in people who are not ideologically defined. It's exactly what Tim Pool tried and failed to do with skateboarding. Pushback works. Yeah, we got to make Tim Pool failing to take over that skate park. We got to do that on a bigger scale. Time traveler here. It's going to shift radically into the fourth dimension very soon. Yeah, so that's why, like, you know, so, a streamer who's the size of Asmongold commanding the largest audience on Twitch as now a political commentator, and labeling all diversity in something like video games as DEI and woke / you know, derogatory is bad. It isn't just something to be like, whatever. Like, it's stupid, but who can, you know, people will obviously see how silly this is. This is happening on a macro level. You know? This isn't just this is not something that is just happening on Twitch. Like, all the way up to Congress, we are seeing the effects of the backlash against diversity and progressivism.
What happened to wearing 6 pounds of makeup and like baking powder into every pore? Like, I miss it. Baking.
Okay, but like the clean girl
Baking.
aesthetic does require a lot of, like, I mean, that's the irony, is like, I feel like you have to buy more crap today than even in 2016, because now you have to do this whole skincare routine,
Yeah.
which I feel like we didn't used to do.
No, that's so true. In 2020, this is so good for the makeup industry in particular, because in 2020, makeup industry sales plummeted because people were like, I'm not going out for this brief period of time. I'm not going to buy as much makeup. So then it became skincare. It became like, you don't wear makeup anymore? We'll sell you $700 of skincare. We can make it even more expensive because it's medically good for you. And now they're bringing back the makeup again. So now it's like, 2016, you need to bake, but also you need to have this $700 skincare routine, and also you need filler. And it's like, conservatism is so good for the women's beauty industry. It is like so great for them that this has happened.
I would like to take a quick break from the show to shout out Actor for making this.
It feels like we're moving 4 steps backward. I'm really looking forward for the Switch. I don't know if it'll be in 2 years or 20. Yeah, I mean, what we're experiencing now is a ping pong effect, and as reactionary beliefs have become more mainstream, it does make it harder to push back on the backlash. I was saying on Will's Kingdom Come Deliverance stream, it's weird how the dudes who care so much about ethnically diverse characters suddenly disappear when everyone in medieval Eastern Europe sounds British for some reason. Yeah, the default British accent. The default British accent for anything or person that is European. So, yes, back to like the clean girl aesthetic, you know, the whole joke there is thinking that there are not tons and tons of products being used and tons of money being spent. Any period piece, regardless of time or location, is British. Yeah, the default. The British Empire was just too powerful.
Making my dinner last night.
Does his hat say Gungle?
Now, let's get back to the show.
All right,
I
this
was
is
looking
almost done, you
at
guys.
old photos of Kylie Jenner, old, like whatever, 8-year-old photos of Kylie Jenner, and then recent photos of Kylie Jenner. I know you mentioned the Kardashians. It's really quite jarring.
It's crazy that I didn't even recognize her in some of these photos, Matt.
But I also remember exactly when these were posted. And I remember for a lot of young white girls that this was like the pinnacle of cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone wanted to look like Kylie. Kylie wanted to look like a black woman. And now Kylie doesn't even want to look like Kylie.
Well, it's also so funny, like the men that they date and surround themselves with.
Yes.
Because they dated a lot of black men early on in their careers. Who
That's
is
what I
Kylie Jenner
said.
with now? Timothy Chalamet, like one of the whitest white guys ever.
They did like the scrawny white man is in for like all of us. The way that they cohesively
I am part of
move
this
their lives as a
podcast.
group is terrifying. I used to think the Kardashians were so cool when I was like a teenager. Now I think the Kardashians are some of the most terrifying people on the planet. Like, not only do they all dress the same, not only do they all do plastic surgery the same, but they also date men the same way. It's so
Yes.
weird. Like the fact that so many of them had children with black men.
Yes.
And now a lot of them are dating like the alt rock style guy, like with Courtney and Travis Barker.
Oh
And
yeah,
then-
I forgot to mention. I always forget about Kourtney Kardashian, but Courtney and Travis Barker.
and with Kylie and Timothy. It's just so weird to me and so like hyper.
I will say Courtney has always been the one in the family who did usually date white men. Her children are with Scott Disick, that piece of shit.
Real that you would be able to like change your whole reality around what is trendy.
People are probably going to yell at me and they're going to be like, really? Like, we did not sign up for this podcast for you to talk about the Kardashians like every other podcast. And like, I feel you, but in putting together some resources for this episode, I was just looking at these, old photos of Kylie Jenner and new photos of Kylie Jenner where she dresses she's dressing like an old money Lake Como princess now. It is pretty disturbing to think about both the fashion choices and you could see, I don't know, I think it is kind of fair to look at their dating patterns and the men that they accumulate.
And I would say, like, in Matt's defense, a podcast about pop culture, examining how pop culture reflects and shapes our society, you can't not talk about the Kardashians. The Kardashians are at the forefront of pop culture.
Like handbags as signs of their political leanings.
Well, I think that Kardashians are such good sort of like chameleons in terms of culture that looking at them is a good way to sort of get a pulse on like what is sort of mainstream trending culture. What is it trending towards? Just because they will exploit any sort of cultural trend to death. They will ride that trend. They will feed into that. They're so in line with whatever is working now currently on the internet.
Yes, and as we talk about influencers and their role in politics now and how, a huge part of Donald Trump's winning the election is attributed to his non-traditional media approach. The Kardashians are like the original influencers. The Kardashians blew the doors open for influencing to become the behemoth that it is now, and how a lot of influencers modeled their paths after the Kardashians and continue to do so. And look, the Kardashians and Donald Trump have a lot in common, right? When they understand, they understand what is what's happening in the culture. The trends that they need to be a part of. That at the end of the day, it is about it's about the aesthetic and the vibes that they're selling. It's not about anything of substance.
And so I think they're just a useful case study when you're looking at these broader aesthetic trends, political trends, And again, it's not surprising that a bunch of girls that grew up in Calabasas would become Republicans or lean conservative. Like again, like it's just that now they can be sort of who they were, right? Like, which is a bunch of rich kids.
Yeah, and the Kardashians and Donald Trump also coming from the world of reality television, and how so much of our politics and our culture just feels like one never-ending episode of reality TV.
I feel like the Kardashians kind of like they exemplify so much of this, because I also feel like they were cosplaying old money before it was like cool to cosplay old money, because going back to the beginning of the Kardashians, they obviously lived very different lifestyles. And like looking at the family history of the Kardashians, it's like, yeah, now they're some of the wealthiest women on the planet, but even that is not really true, because like we know like Kylie pretends to be a billionaire. Like she may be a billionaire now, but when she did the Forbes billionaire cover, it was like actually not true. She was not a billionaire. So it's like they're the original, I have more money than I really have, I'm projecting the standard of what is cool.
I also think it's interesting how the MAGA movement has adopted a different aesthetic. Like, I mean, the MAGA movement from back, I was looking before this episode of my photo roll back from 2016 when I was on the campaign trail with Trump and those rallies. And it was a lot of poor people basically wearing like really wild outfits and like super like glitzy. Everyone had like blinged out like MAGA sort of
like very
things. It just looked very, very
trashy
tacky. And Trump himself has this like sort of gold, like, you know, corny, like Vegas style kind of aesthetic to himself that then his supporters mimic. And they were making a lot out of the MAGA American flags. I know you posted about that crazy woman that shows up to the Grammys, but like,
Joy Villa.
But that aesthetic of like using the MAGA flag itself, this like cheap polyester flag to like make your shirts and things, and just the, you know, like they were so tacky back then. And I don't think that the MAGA aesthetic had sort of like, you know, it was seen as outside of the traditional Republican aesthetic, you know, that somebody like Mitt Romney or George Bush, you know, embodied, which is that old school conservative Reagan sort of style aesthetic. But now, as I feel like the MAGA movement has become more mainstream Republican, and as they've become more kind of like, they just took over the party basically, they have adopted the aesthetics, the traditional aesthetics of the traditional Republican Party, where now you have people in their cashmere cable knits and their nice blazers, and they're like, there's just a lot of them that are starting to dress like everyone at this Cruel Kids party, right? Like they're dressing like traditional Republicans. They look like traditional Republicans.
We've touched on a lot of
and as I said earlier, a big part of what like young MAGA people have been trying to do is to take the spotlight away from the, you know, Meemaw and Peepaw who are wearing like blinged out Make America Great Again just head to toe, and are, you know, who traditionally you would think of as like MAGA people, and move away from them and be like, no. We think that they're weird too. Okay. Like we're on the same side, but we're also like, we're better than them. And move the spotlight over to a more tasteful MAGA.
things. But I do want to mention before we move on from like the Kardashian of it all is that while looking black as a white person was cool, like they did it and then they moved on. And like, I think it's important that like to note that the people who benefited the most from that kind of brief shift in beauty standards to like the big butt and the big lips, like Black people did not ultimately benefit from that.
No.
You know, I think like a lot of Black people in Black culture were exploited by that for people like the Kardashians to get rich off of.
The argument at the time, because obviously as this era was ongoing, people, especially Black people, were calling it out for what it was, which was appropriation. And at the time, the refrain was always like, it's not appropriation, it's cultural appreciation, actually. And now we know definitively that that was not true, because we now have this like current political moment that is, and the people who did this, some of them, who are now openly, more overtly conservative, it's like, of course you didn't appreciate Black culture. You now are like, I hate DEI, I hate critical race theory. Like, clearly that was never the case. And throughout history, white people have exploited Black people and Black culture for their own financial gain, only in like an abusive dynamic. So I feel like at this point, now that we're in like the conservative influencer era, it's like, so now fully all of that was a lie. Like, all of your defenses about, I am progressive.
Yeah, because like they got their
She's spitting real shit. Yeah, Kat's great. I've had her on a couple times. I also saw some comparisons between the fashion at the inauguration to Kate Middleton and royal fashion. I mean, talk about another specific pipeline from like obsessed with the royal family, which in my opinion tends to skew female. Like, the people I know who are obsessed with all things royal family related, except for Meghan Markle, are women. And so that pipeline of like can't get enough of British royalty to alt-right, like that is a pipeline as well. And that's why, like, you know, the embracing of the insanely racist British tabloids that had a field day ripping Meghan Markle apart, and then how that bled into American, into like the way that Americans viewed Meghan Markle, and how Meghan Markle is another celebrity woman who has been totally maligned and who is seen as like this villainous figure. And that comes from the racist royal family in cahoots with the racist British tabloids.
BBLs removed. They've deflated their
The royal
lips.
family
Like,
propaganda
they're done.
and all the celebrity mags is so shady. My granny should not give a fuck about Meghan Markle. Yeah, and the things that your granny is reading about Meghan Markle is coming straight from like the British Inquirer.
And with that whole look, and they can easily move on because, again, it was only ever an aesthetic for them.
So, you know, the Kardashians obviously can afford to buy into whatever's trendy. They can get surgeries. They can deflate the surgeries. They can buy the nicest version of whatever clothing is in at the time. They can afford to cosplay as Black. They can afford to revert back to old whiteness. But the average person cannot. And the young conservatives who are, like we said, you know, cosplaying as these like old money children can't. And neither can like normal people. Taylor, in your piece that you wrote about the, what was it? The Tuxedo
Society.
The Tuxedo Society, which I'm going to link in the episode description. But you wrote, at a time when economic mobility is increasingly out of reach for young people, cosplaying wealth has become more and more popular.
Yeah, I feel like just that's what so much of these aesthetics and this whole, I mean, the whole Make America Great Again movement is about. It's like sort of yearning for this lifestyle that doesn't exist anymore. Like this old money world, it doesn't really exist in America anymore. Like, yeah, you have some like a sort of ever decreasing amount of like rich waspy families, but most people have to hustle. There is no stability in the world. And so much of like it just doesn't exist. Like old money doesn't exist. Like those people, by the way, are increasingly bankrupt. Like they are. Old money like lost a lot of their money in 2008, especially, like if not sooner. Most of those people, like their third grandson lost all the wealth, you know, already, like on his weird e-commerce brand. Like everyone else has to like have 4 different jobs. Like it is just increasingly hard. And same thing with, you know, the tradwife stuff. Like all of these aesthetics, like what they're selling is this time that is linked in people's minds to stability or to a lifestyle of leisure and stability. It's like dress like a housewife, right? Like let's go back to the 50s. Women didn't have to work. You had a man to work for you. It's like, okay, so then you're dependent on his job. You're still dependent on someone's labor.
Couldn't have a
you
credit
just don't
card.
have direct control of it. But it's like yearning and sort of trying to aesthetically adopt and embody these like leisure lives and this lives that just doesn't exist in our economy because we live in a late capitalist hellscape. Everyone has to grind, everyone has to work, everyone has to hustle. And I feel like people, they yearn for a time when that didn't exist. And the reality is that time is gone. We have been robbed by billionaires. Wealth disparity is at record high. Like that world is not coming back anytime soon, and certainly not by moving further to the right. So I just think it's interesting, like at this time of such economic precarity, when
yeah, and just sorry, Taylor, you're spitting there, but to just to cut in, and the Republicans in charge, they fucking know this. Okay, they are selling people a fantasy. Okay, alt-right influencers are selling a fantasy. Politicians, politicians on the right are selling a fantasy. And they're selling bullshit. They're snake oil salesmen. They're snake oil, they're selling snake oil and simultaneously continuing to gut social programs, continuing to deregulate, continuing to pass more tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. So no, we're not returning to some fantasy world where stability and security was rampant. That those were the good times. They're selling snoil. There was too many S's in that sentence. They are selling snoil.
These people will never have, like, they can rent out a villa in Lake Como and dress up in their Temu dresses, but they're never going to have that stability that they crave. They're never going to ultimately be able to live the old money lifestyle because it just doesn't exist.
I think that's so central to this whole phenomenon, Taylor. And I feel like what we were initially talking about with the clothes that the women were wearing in the New York Mag cover and how it looks like it's Shein. Of course, it might not be, but it is the aesthetic of fast fashion because fast fashion is what most people choose to wear. And it
Taylor's been on here. That's why I keep joking I'm a part of this podcast, because I've had 2 of the 3 people on this podcast come on my stream before. Now I just have to have Matt, and then I'll have all 3.
It strikes me that a lot of the choices that these young conservatives are making are very relatable, even to people who are not conservative whatsoever. I personally have bought and wear fast fashion. I don't think it's good. I just know that, if I want to dress up nice, I can't actually afford a $1,200 dress. I have to find some sort of dupe of, nice clothing because I personally can't afford it. So it's I see why these young people are choosing to basically fantasize about a life that they will never lead because the resources just aren't there. But it's harmful not only to themselves, the fact that they're choosing to live in this fantasy world where being conservative will make them rich. It won't. But they're also living this fantasy very obviously and blatantly at the expense of other people. So
if you are rich, being conservative will make you richer. But being conservative will not make you rich.
It's while a lot of us are going to have to make choices based on a lack of the ability to accumulate wealth, it's these people are choosing to be I just want it better than you. I just want more power than the person next to me. So it's all very transparent, and it's I do not feel bad for them. Maybe there's a tiny bit of pity because I'm you're never actually going to live the life you project.
I feel like our whole culture is this whole culture is just a dupe of old school conservatism. It's just a cheap Trump-made, China-made dupe of original conservatism, which was so problematic and honestly not worth duping to begin with. But now we're living in the cheap knockoff copy that's somehow even worse.
Because it's just so silly. It's just so silly. And Kat, you said that you don't feel badly for them, and I'm with you because a lot of these people just voted against all of our rights. But I think it's important to note that I'm gonna bring back this New York Magazine cover and this beautiful 21-year-old girl in her polyester dress. All of these people in this New York Magazine cover have more in common with me and with the both of you than they do with these people that they're trying to emulate and like the overlords that they're voting for.
Yes.
I always find a way in every episode of this podcast to blame billionaires for everything, and I'm gonna do it again.
It's true.
These people, through fashion, through their voting, they over-identify with people, you know, like Elon Musk, like Donald Trump, people who have wealth that they will never...
Donald Trump, who just referred to himself as the king today. No surprise
never
there.
See nor touch in their entire lives. These people have to work just like the rest of us. They're just dressing and dreaming about a world in which they don't. But like you said, Taylor, that world is gone. You know, I'm a fan of the statement that every single person, you know, like us, like the people in this cover, has more in common with every person living on the streets than they do with any billionaire. And that will more than likely be the case for the rest of all of our lives. And it's like, they're just faking it. And in the process of faking it, yes, they're like supporting billionaires by like buying fast fashion and whatever, but they're also politically aligning themselves with a movement that, like you said, Taylor, will hurt them too. Like, I know so many people see me on the internet and they're just like, oh, like the gay guy with the nails, which I actually don't have right now because like my nails are, my real nails are suffering underneath the fake ones. I had to take a break. But they think that I'm yelling at them for like dressing up like heteronormatively or whatever. And it's like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to convey, I guess, regardless of how you choose to accessorize yourself, which we all do, we all just have more in common with each other than we do with billionaires. And putting on like your Men's Warehouse rental tuxedo isn't going to change that. But it is sad how popular those have gotten. And I know because I wore one to my brother's wedding.
Yeah, and you know, we've already seen a number of people who are unfortunately getting hit by the mass Doge layoffs, writing things on Facebook like, Mr. Trump, I voted for you. Like, Mr. Musk, I'm a big fan. You know, why did I lose my job? Why did I get fired? Kind of this idea of like, you said everyone, you know, it was going to be the other people, but not me. Like, I'm one of your soldiers. And it's just a reminder that these politicians and billionaires who view themselves as these great overlords, they care about one thing and one thing only, and that is their interests. That is protecting and continuing to grow their interests. So always remember, you have more in common with somebody who is sleeping on the street than you do with a billionaire.
I think I have like trauma because it reminds me so much of Connecticut and and my like childhood and growing up around people, you know, I thought that like we had moved past that era, and it's scary to see some of this stuff come back. I think, like Kat was saying, so much of that culture of the early 2010s, that like liberal culture, it was like actually such a brief glimmer of like a potential more inclusive world. And now we've snapped right back. And I think you can see that visually in the rise of all of these aesthetics.
I think part of the issue is that influencers live, by definition, unstable lives, where it's like, how am I going to keep profiting? I'm not actually building like generation.
How am I going to keep profiting? Well, here's a perfect segue to remind you that if you have Amazon Prime, you can get one free Prime sub a month to use on your favorite content creator who maybe talks about pop culture through a leftist perspective and is trying to make sure that pop culture does not completely fall into the hands of those on the right. Or if you are able to subscribe or get lucky and be gifted a sub and can continue to support the stream, or most importantly, just keep showing up. Keep showing up, keep watching the stream, follow the stream, etc., etc.
Opportunities for myself. I'm just like cashing in on whatever the moment is. But with all these people, I'm like, you you thought you picked the path that would give you
Star
what you really
Kid,
wanted,
thank you
but you
for
got
the 4
tricked.
months.
Like, you think you won. You guys are celebrating.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Comic Juarez, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. McCormick, thank you for the 11 months. Star Kids, thank you for the 4 months. MKI Train Girl, thank you for the tier
Now
1.
you're saying all the slurs you ever wanted to. But in the end, like, you were the one who fell for, like, a billionaire claiming that this is going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for you. And so, yeah. This part of influencer culture isn't fun anymore because now it's just like a fake veneer on an enormous amount of human suffering that is a direct result of their actions.
I kind of want to join the tuxedo
Society.
The
We are
tuxedo
one
society
step closer
so
to
I
the
get
leftists winning a
infiltrated.
total cultural
That could be
victory.
a bonus episode for the Patreon.
Please go undercover. Please go undercover.
I don't have my nails right now. I attended a tuxedo society event, so you don't have to.
I think the jig's going to be up at some point.
You think so?
Yeah.
Back to 2016 painted on eyebrows. God willing.
We need Generation Beta or whatever to come of age and then think that all this conservative shit's lame and go back to, be like mega woke or something.
God willing, the pendulum will swing and like colorful eyeshadow will be back or something.
It will, because look, it's swaying to the right, and that's where we're at right now. All right, and it sucks, and it's shitty, but the pendulum swung that way, and it will swing back. It will. It always does.
Something. And until then, I'll be wearing it anyway, so.
It's actually resistance to dress like James Charles
Got
in
that pendulum
2016.
down.
It's actually good praxis.
Taylor and Kat, where can people find you now that we're all freelancers and don't have health insurance?
Subscribe to my YouTube channel and subscribe to usermag.co, not .com, .co. That's usermag.co.
Well, as of today, I'm at spitfirenews.com. That's like my first time promoting it out loud. And you can also follow me on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on TikTok while it's still around. But please subscribe to my newsletter. It is free, and I'm very excited to write about all of these topics and more.
It's actually 6,000 euros a month.
My newsletter is actually just redirects to the Tuxedo Club homepage.
That's the elite tier. That's where you get invited to the parties where we all dress up in our, Zara.
That's the Fashion Nova party.
Thank you so much for being here. What a silly, funny time we're all living in. But at least we can be honest about it, unlike the people at the Tuxedo Society. I love you all. I hope that you are all doing whatever you need to do to keep your head screwed
Yeah,
on
he
straight,
has
because
amazing
we
skin.
all
I'm jealous.
need
I also
to
love his
stick
light
around for
setup.
each other to see the other side of this, and we will. I love you, and until next time, stay fruity.
Stay fruity.
Concerns.
Stay fruity.